Hi, I'm Beatrice. They told me I was too sensitive, that I made things bigger than they were. But when my sister locked me in our family car and turned the heat all the way up, then walked away like it was nothing, I begged. I screamed through the glass until my throat went raw. When my mom found me, she didn't rush to help. She looked me in the eye and said, "Stop being dramatic." It wasn't the first time they ignored my pain, but it was the first time the burn spoke louder than I ever could. So I wonder, how many times can a family rewrite the truth before someone decides to burn the script? And if you were that someone, what would you do? It was just another Thursday morning, but you wouldn't know it by the way my mother flitted around the kitchen like she was hosting a White House brunch. The eggs were overcooked, the toast burned on one side, and the coffee was weak. But you'd think she was plating for Martha Stewart. "Callista's coming home this weekend," she sang like a church bell. "We should put fresh flowers in the hallway." I didn't even bother responding. I was elbows deep in dish soap, scrubbing last night's lasagna from a baking dish that Callista had insisted we just toss in the sink before she left. I glanced over at the clock above the microwave. 6:42 a.m. I hadn't even brushed my teeth yet. She said she might have an interview lined up with a PR firm in San Diego. Isn't that amazing? I bit the inside of my cheek. "Great," I murmured, my voice lost beneath the faucet's rush. My mother didn't hear me. Or maybe she did and chose not to. Either way, she turned away, humming some old tune as if the day had already gone perfectly. When Callista breezed into the kitchen 30 minutes later, freshly blow-dried hair, and a crop top too small for winter, the air shifted. My mother turned from a chef to a fan club president. "There she is," Mom beamed. "Looking like $1,000,000, Callista." Grinned like she knew it. She always did. I didn't even wash my face yet. "I wish I had your skin," Mom replied, then turned to me, barely making eye contact. "B, would you mind folding the towels upstairs?" After I finished cleaning up in here, I said without sarcasm. It didn't matter. By then she was already walking away, arm looped through Callista's like they were sorority sisters instead of mother and daughter. I dried my hands on a paper towel, staring at the sink full of soap bubbles that had begun to fade. It felt like a metaphor I didn't have the energy to finish. Later that afternoon, Verena invited Mrs. Hanley from next door over for tea. I sat at the kitchen counter, pretending to scroll through my phone, while they chattered about Callista's academic success, her future career, her perfect wardrobe, her even more perfect boyfriend. "She's always been such a natural," Mom gushed. "Since she was a baby, really." Mrs. Hanley nodded. "It's rare to see a young woman with such direction." I looked up, trying to interject something. "Anything." "She left the garage door open last night," I said. Verena shot me a look, like I'd just shouted profanity. "Beatrice, that's not necessary. I'm just saying we don't need to air petty complaints." She cut me off, smiling back at Mrs. Hanley like I hadn't even spoken. Siblings, right? That was when I felt it. Not just heard it, but felt it. I wasn't real to her, unless I was a problem. Callista waltzed in, then holding a bag of takeout she didn't plan to share. "I left the garage open?" she asked, half laughing. "I was just saying," I began. "I mean, it's not like we live in a war zone," she said. "Chill out, B." Mrs. Hanley laughed along. Verena changed the subject before I could respond. The rest of the day slipped by in a fog of passive errands and avoided eye contact. I loaded the dishwasher. I vacuumed the rug that didn't look dirty. I helped my dad, Gareth, replace a porch light bulb because he didn't want to climb the ladder himself. "Thanks, kiddo," he said, handing me a soda. Afterward, "You're good at this stuff." I wanted to tell him that the stuff was The only reason anyone even noticed I existed, but I didn't. Gareth never picked sides. That was his thing. Neutral until the roof caved in. It was near sunset when Verena called out from the porch, "Beatrick, help your sister with the groceries." I rushed out eager for a chance to contribute something visible. Callista stood by her car, arms folded. "Took you long enough," she muttered, tossing me 2 grocery bags that were clearly overfilled. As I tried to balance them, the paper ripped, and cans spilled onto the driveway. "God," Verena hissed from the porch. "Can you just stop being dramatic for once?" There was a knife right through the ribs, but sharpened with years of repetition. I picked up the cans in silence, cheeks burning. Callista stepped over one of them and sauntered inside. That night I didn't bother turning on the lamp in my room. I sat by the window with my journal, pages already half filled with things I'd never say out loud. I tried to write something poetic, but all I could manage was the truth. They don't see me. I could vanish and they'd thank her for the quiet. I didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because it had hurt for so long. I'd learned how to live beside it. The next morning came like any other. I was setting the table when I heard Callista's phone buzz on the kitchen counter. She was upstairs, probably curling her eyelashes. The screen lit up with a message preview. "She still thinks she can outshine me. Cute." Something cold ran through me. Not fear. Exactly, but the kind of cold that tells you you're done being fooled. I looked up. She was coming down the stairs, smiling. That smile, it wasn't real anymore. It wasn't just sibling rivalry. It was war. I didn't start the engine. I just sat there, hands clenched in my lap, watching the condensation beat on the windshield. The air inside the SUV was stale, carrying traces of spilled soda and fast food wrappers shoved into the side panel. I imagined the headlines: "Teen found in family car, forgotten again." Maybe they'd mention my name in the second paragraph. Maybe not. The silence was suffocating but familiar. Too familiar. Eventually, the cold pushed me back into motion. I stepped out of the car, quietly shut the door, and returned to the house like a ghost, one no one believed in. Upstairs, I heard Callista laughing into her phone. That same laugh I used to mimic when we were little, before I learned it was weaponized. I passed by her bedroom. The door cracked, open enough to hear her say she's still mad about the scarf. Like, get over it. It's a piece of fabric. And there it was. My birthday had passed 2 weeks earlier. No cake, no candles, no one said anything, not even a quick happy birthday on the fridge whiteboard. I hadn't expected a party. I'd stopped hoping for that years ago. But I did save up for one thing, a silk scarf for Mom, cream with embroidered edges. I wrapped it carefully with a note tucked inside. "Thanks for always keeping us together. Love, B." She never opened it. That weekend, Callista came home for a brief visit. Sunday morning, I walked into the kitchen, and there it was, my scarf draped over Mom's shoulders. "Oh, honey," she said, beaming at Callista. "This is so elegant. You always know just what I like." I froze. Callista just smiled and said, "Only the best for the best." She hadn't even unwrapped it. The note was gone. Later that day, I found the card I wrote crumpled under the sink, beside a grocery receipt. Not torn, not stained, just ignored. It wasn't that they forgot. It was that they chose not to see me. That realization hit again the following week during health screening week at school. I handed in my consent form to the nurse like everyone else, but she stopped me with a raised brow. "You're not on the active insurance list," she said, flipping through a binder. "You sure this is your policy?" I frowned. "It's the one I've always had. My parents didn't say anything about changes." She shook her head. You'll need to ask them. What if I get sick? She shrugged. Well, you're not a baby. It's time you learned how things work. It wasn't a conversation. It was a transaction I'd already lost. That night, we had dinner, as if nothing had happened. Roasted chicken over steamed broccoli and a toast. Of course, for Callista's appearance on the dean's list to Callie. Verena said, lifting her wine glass. The one who keeps raising the bar. I raised my glass, too, mostly so I didn't have to speak. Guess we'll need to update the insurance again, Gareth chimed in, slicing into his chicken, since she's covered under the university. Now. They all nodded, smiled, continued. I sat there blinking at my plate. It wasn't an oversight. It was a decision. After dinner, I stayed behind to clear the table while everyone else migrated to the living room to watch some show. Callista insisted on. When the last fork clinked into the dishwasher, I wandered toward the garage. I didn't have a plan. I just needed quiet. I slipped into the SUV again, shut the door gently behind me, and leaned back. In the seat, the air inside was colder, now heavy with the day's residue. I watched my breath fog up the glass. And I thought, if I disappeared right here, right now, would anyone even notice? Before the engine cooled, would they pause the show? Would they text me to grab more milk? Would they carry on like they always did, with Callista in the center, orbiting her, light like we had no gravitational pull of our own? I didn't cry, not because it didn't ache, but because the ache was so familiar, it didn't deserve tears anymore. That night, long after the house went quiet, I couldn't sleep. So I went back to my journal, the one I kept hidden in a shoebox under my bed. They think silence is peace. They think forgetting is forgiveness. They think ignoring me is kindness because they're not yelling, but silence can kill, too. Sometimes slower, sometimes deeper, but it still cuts. At school the next day while waiting outside the nurse's office to sort out my insurance issue, I overheard two students talking nearby. She gave her mom that scarf and the sister took credit. Straight up mean girl behavior. My head jerked up. One of them caught my eye, then looked away. Quickly. People were watching. They were starting to see, but it wasn't validation I wanted. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted truth. The kind that couldn't be swept under rugs or whispered into revised versions of events. When I got home that afternoon, the house was quiet. I climbed the stairs past Callista's room. Her door was open. She was lying on her stomach, texting. Her phone buzzed again, screen lighting up. I caught a glimpse as I walked by. Don't worry, she'll get over it. She always does. I kept walking, but I didn't head to my room. I went back to the garage, back to the SUV. This time, I locked the door behind me. I stared at the nurse behind the counter, trying to process what she had just said. Her voice was steady, professional, not unkind, but the words hit like a punch in the ribs. You don't have a file in the system. Are you sure you're still enrolled under this family? The air in the nurse's office suddenly felt thick. The cheap wall clock ticked behind me, loud and indifferent. I forced a smile. I'll check with them. Maybe it's a computer error. She nodded already, turning to her next file. Happens. Sometimes. Let me know when you find out. I walked out of the office like I was balancing something fragile on my back. Like one wrong move would crack me open. The hallway buzzed with the usual in-between class noise. Laughter, locker slams, footsteps against tile. But it felt muted, like I was watching it all through glass. I didn't go back to class. I needed air. I wandered behind the school building, found a quiet bench near the staff parking lot, and sat down. That's when the memory came. Not slowly, but all at once, like a dam breaking. I was 6. We were outside St. Mary's Church. It was Easter Sunday. I Remember the floral dress Mom made me wear, itchy and stiff with a ribbon I couldn't untie on my own. We were running late, and Callista had forgotten her gloves. "I'll just be a minute," Mom said, locking the car doors as she left me in the back seat. "Don't mess up your dress." The windows were cracked. Not enough. I remember kicking my legs back and forth, then curling them under me. The sun was warm, then hot, then too much. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed my arm, an oxygen clip on my finger. I couldn't breathe right. My skin itched, like it was trying to crawl away from me. Verena stood over me, brushing my bangs from my face. "She must have eaten something bad," she said to the nurse. "Her stomach was off all morning." The nurse nodded, made a note. I couldn't find the strength to speak. Until this moment, I had never questioned that story. But now, sitting in the shadow of a school building, I could feel the heat again. Oppressive, choking, crawling into every cell of my memory. It wasn't food. It was heat. Again. They covered it up back then, too. I didn't realize I was shaking until someone called my name. "Beatrice." It was Ava, a girl from my English class. She looked concerned. "You okay?" I nodded. Quickly. "Yeah, just tired." She hesitated. "Hey, it wasn't your birthday, eh? Couple weeks ago." I blinked. "Yeah, I heard something about the scarf," she said carefully, "that your sister took credit for it. I mean, not to pry, but people noticed." I didn't know what to say. It felt strange, this tiny thread of validation. "I don't get involved in family stuff," she added, defensive now. "But Callista said you were always kind of dramatic." That word again. She told people I made things up. I said not to her, but maybe to the sky. Even when we were little. Ava shifted uncomfortably. "I mean, yeah, I guess she's been saying that for a long time." There it was. The truth sat between us, heavier than her sympathy, colder than her hesitance. Callista didn't just take my things, she took my story. She built a reputation on top of mine. Hers shiny and polished, mine unstable and cracked. Later that afternoon, I went home and tried to focus on homework, but my mind kept drifting, digging deeper into the past like it was searching for buried landmines. I remember the ice cream. I was 9. It was summer. We were at a friend's backyard barbecue. I had just gotten a scoop of mint chocolate chip, my favorite. I turned around too quickly, bumped into Callista, and the cone fell to the ground. She dropped it herself. Callista said instantly, loud enough for everyone to hear, "She's always so clumsy." Verena didn't even look at me. "Honestly, Beatrice," she sighed, "that's why you always need attention." It was nothing then, a moment, a shrug. But now it didn't feel small. It felt like scaffolding. They built a reality around making me wrong. Every stumble, every tear, every attempt to explain myself had been another brick in the narrative. Beatrice is the problem. Callista is the prize. When Gareth came home from work that evening, I asked him directly, did I ever have heat stroke when I was little? He looked up from his phone. "What?" "When I was 6, I continued. Easter outside the church. Did I get sick?" He frowned, thoughtful. "I think you had food poisoning or something, right? Your mom said you threw up in the car." I stared at him. "I didn't. I passed out. I woke up in a hospital bed within 4. He shook his head slowly as if trying to brush off the fog. "You sure? That was a long time ago." "Dad, why would I make that up?" He looked away, uncomfortable. "I'm not saying you're lying. It's just, well, your mother remembers it differently." There it was again. I wasn't lying. I just didn't have the right narrator. That night, I dreamed I was back in the car, sunlight pouring through the windows, sweat pooling under my knees, my voice breaking as I screamed for someone, anyone to open the door. When I woke up, my pillow was down. I need a copy of my vaccination file, I said. The clerk, a woman named Helen, with a thick pair of glasses and a kind smile, tapped at her keyboard, her brows pulled together. Honey, there's no record for you. Not under Beatrice Crawford. Are you sure you're still enrolled under this family? I didn't answer right away because in that moment, I knew I hadn't been under this family in a long time. The words settled between us like a question made of bricks. Do you feel safe at home, doctor? Isa had asked it quietly, almost gently, as if she were afraid I might shatter. Just from the sound of it, I didn't answer her, not right away. My eyes dropped to the clipboard in her hands, and for a second I wanted to say yes. It would have been easier, cleaner, familiar. But lying had done nothing but bury me deeper. So I said, not really. She nodded once, without surprise, and wrote something down. That evening, the silence in the house felt more deliberate than usual. Even the floorboards seemed to know better than to creak. I hovered in the hallway for a moment, watching my reflection in the hallway mirror. Same hair, same eyes, same nothing expression that I had perfected over the years. Dinner was already on the table when I stepped into the kitchen. Vera stood by the stove, spooning mashed potatoes onto her plate like everything in the world was fine. Gareth was reading something on his phone, glasses low on his nose. Callista sat at the head of the table. Like always, phone tilted just enough to catch her best angle under the dining room light. I sat down, waited a moment, then said carefully, "Hey, I need to talk to you both." They didn't look up. I found out at school that I'm not on the family insurance anymore. That got their attention barely. Verena glanced over. "What are you talking about?" "The school nurse couldn't find my records," I said. "I wasn't listed on any active policy." Verena's hand didn't stop moving. She reached for the salt shaker. "That's probably a system glitch. Don't overreact." "Oh, Vera, of course. I talked to the nurse twice. She said, I'm not covered. Did you remove me?" Verena gave a small shrug. "Beatrice, we've had to adjust some things. You're almost grown. It's not like you get sick." Gareth cleared his throat like he was going to add something, but thought better of it and went back to chewing. "And you didn't think I needed to know?" "I didn't think you'd notice," she said. "Matter of fact, it's not like you participate in family planning discussions." Callista chuckled under her breath. That was when something inside me snapped, but not the way it had before. No tears, no raised voice, just a shift, a quiet folding inward, like packing up the last box in a house you know you'll never return to. 2 days passed. No apology, no explanation. Then came the mall trip. We were supposed to be shopping for school supplies. Callista was in charge. Apparently, we argued near the checkout because she forgot to bring the list and refused to call Mom. On the way back to the car, she said, "You've got a bad attitude. You need to chill." I didn't even respond. She started the car, let the engine run, and the moment I buckled in, she stepped out. "I'll be back," she said. "Stay put." She cranked the heat before slamming the door shut. The lock clicked. I waited and waited. Minutes turned thick, unbreathable. I pounded on the window, yelled her name. My vision blurred. I tasted metal. I don't know how long I was in there before someone opened the door. It wasn't Callista. It was Verena. She looked irritated. "For God's sake, Beatrice," she snapped. "You weren't in there that long." I couldn't speak. My lips were cracked, sweat clinging to the edge of my hairline. I told her to stay, Callista said from behind her, completely unfazed. She said she needed to cool off, so I gave her space. Verena gave a tight smile like it was all a funny misunderstanding. They made it a joke. Again. At the clinic, my temperature was higher. than normal. My arms were red, skin dry, and itchy. The nurse applied a cooling pack. Then Dr. Isa walked in. Her eyes moved over me quickly, then settled on my face. How long was she in the car? Vera answered before I could open my mouth. Maybe 5 minutes. She's been having these dramatic episodes lately. Dr. Isa didn't nod. She didn't write right away. She just looked at Verena for a long second, then back at me. Can I speak to Beatrix alone? Verena hesitated. I don't think that's necess. It's standard, Dr. Isa said firmly. Just a few questions. Vera left with a forced smile. Callista followed, still scrolling her phone. When the door closed, Dr. Isa pulled up a chair and sat beside me. Beatrice, she said, gently. How long were you in that car? I swallowed. I don't know. Maybe half an hour, maybe more. She nodded. That's consistent with what we're seeing. I need to file an incident report. Okay. That doesn't mean anything is decided yet. It just means we're documenting. I nodded. She paused, then asked, do you feel safe at home? And for the second time in less than a week, I heard that question again. Only this time the answer came easier. No, she nodded. Again, didn't write it down, but I could tell she'd remember every word. We finished the exam. I was cleared to leave. Outside the office, Verena stood, tapping her heel against the floor like I'd made her late for something important. No more dramatics. All right, she said as if that could undo the last hour. On the drive home, no one spoke. The car was silent except for the soft sound of Callista's gum snapping in rhythm. When we pulled into the driveway, I didn't wait. I got out and went straight to my room. I didn't cry, not even when I looked at the red patches on my skin in the mirror. I just stared. They were there, visible, real, and maybe for once undeniable. I left the clinic feeling both hollow and heavier. It's a strange thing when someone finally hears you, stranger, still when they believe you. And yet it doesn't bring relief right away. It only reminds you how long you've been screaming into a void. That evening I didn't join them for dinner. I said I had homework, which wasn't a lie, but not the full truth either. I needed space, not the kind they pretend to give you, but real space. The kind that lets you breathe without second-guessing every inhale. Around 9 p.m., while the dishwasher hummed and the nightly news played softly in the living room, I overheard Verena on the phone. Her voice was sharp and patient. I think the clinic's blowing it out of proportion. It was barely 20 minutes. You know how Beatrice is always emotional. It took everything in me not to storm in and shout. It was 43 minutes, but I stayed quiet for now. The next morning I was called to the school office during second period. The receptionist handed me the phone. It's Dr. Isa, she said. It's important. I took the receiver with slightly trembling hands. Bat, she said, calm but firm. I wanted to let you know we received the footage. The mall security office pulled the parking lot cam. Your sister left you in the car. Heat on 43 minutes. There it was. The truth printed in digital timestamps. I'm documenting it in the report, she added. And I've notified the school counselor. Just so you know, you'll have support. I swallowed hard. Thank you. After school, instead of heading straight home, I walked to the library. I needed quiet, needed to think. Sitting at one of the corner tables, I pulled out my notebook, but instead of writing, I just stared at the page. 43 minutes. Not 5, not 20, not a misunderstanding. I walked home slower than usual, dragging my feet over sidewalks I used to race down as a kid. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. Garrett's keys were on the table, his work boots by the door. He was home early. I found him in the den, half dozing in his recliner, the TV playing Some nature documentary. He startled when I walked in. Hey kiddo, he said. So I didn't. I'm sorry. It wasn't dated. It wasn't signed, but it was real. I stood in that closet for what felt like forever, reading and rereading every line. I couldn't tell if it made things better or worse. He knew he had known. And still, he sat at that table every night and let them talk over me. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. Then I went to my room and waited. Dinner that night was spaghetti and tension. Callista was scrolling her phone between bites. Verena poured herself a second glass of wine. Gareth, as usual, said little. Halfway through the meal, I cleared my throat. I have the footage. Vera looked up, eyes narrowing. What footage? The mall. The car. The 43 minutes. Silence. The doctor knows. And now the school does, too. So, you can't lie this one away. Benna set her wine glass down with more force than necessary. You went behind our backs and... No, I cut her off. You left me behind. And I proved it. Callista scoffed. Oh, please. You sound ridiculous. Go ahead, I said, staring straight at her. Tell everyone I'm making it up, but this time it won't work. She laughed low and smug. Who's going to believe a bitter little girl? I stood up, calm, certain. Everyone, because this time I won't be quiet. I didn't wait for their response. I walked out of the room, each step feeling lighter than the one before. Upstairs, I sat on the edge of my bed, letting the silence settle. A few minutes later, I heard the softing of a phone. Curiosity pulled me to the hallway. I peered down the stairs, careful not to be seen. Callista was on the couch, typing furiously. Her screen lit up with a message preview. She's making it public. We need to handle this before it spreads. Handle this like I was a scandal, a mess to be managed. I turned away. They thought this was the end. They had no idea it was just the beginning. By the time I walked upstairs that night, the house was holding its breath. Dinner had ended in an uncomfortable hush, and no one spoke as I cleared my plate and disappeared down the hall. Behind the closed door of my bedroom, I sat on the edge of my bed, knees bouncing, fingers twitching like they were still holding the print outside. Shown them the evidence, the truth. They hadn't seen it coming, and I hadn't seen how good it would feel to say it out loud. But as satisfying as that moment had been, it didn't last long. The war started the next morning. Callista's first move was online. I found out before I even got to homeroom. My phone buzzed with a message from a girl in my history class. Is it true your family's turning on you? Confused, I opened Instagram. There she was. Callista, gorgeous, poised, sitting in front of our family fireplace like it was her personal stage, a soft filtered video with piano music underscoring her voice, carefully fragile. This has been so hard, she began, her eyes glassy. My family is falling apart, and there are people saying awful things about me, about my mom. All I can say is, please, be kind, especially to those who are hurting. A vague post, no names, but every word hit its mark. I watched as the comments poured in. You're so strong. Sending prayers, girl. People always try to tear down good women. #protect Callista started trending in the local circle within the hour. By lunch, I was no longer invisible, but not in the way I'd hoped. People whispered when I passed. Some stared. A few avoided me completely. Guess she's going for attention again. I heard one girl mutter near the vending machine. At home, it only got worse. Verena had sent out a message in the family group chat that I wasn't even part of anymore. I saw a screenshot of it later forwarded by someone I didn't expect. She's struggling with some emotional instability right now. Verena had written, we're trying our best to help her through it, but she's twisting things. Please keep us in your prayers. It took everything in me not to throw something across the room, but I didn't. I waited. I didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, I was called back into the clinic, not by appointment, but because Dr. Isa had something she wanted to show me. She closed the door to her office behind me and laid a sheet of paper on the desk. It was a screenshot, a message from Callista to one of her friends. Let the brat sweat a bit. She deserves to melt for once. I stared at it for a long time, not blinking. My stomach twisted, not from surprise, but from the sheer cruelty of seeing it, typed out without even a hint of shame. This was submitted anonymously. Dr. Isa said, "It came from a student at your school. We're adding it to the report." I finally looked up. It's not just proof, it's motive. She gave me a small nod. Exactly. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window watching the street lamps flicker across the pavement, wondering how many people had bought into her performance. Callista had always been good at this, spinning stories, collecting pity. She knew how to cry without ruining her makeup, how to tilt her voice just enough to sound broken. And Verena, she was the backing choir, always harmonizing with Callista's solo. But they weren't the only ones who could speak. The next day, I got an unexpected visitor. I was walking out of school when I saw him leaning against his pickup truck at the edge of the lot. Eldon Fraser, our neighbor, retired sheriff's deputy, lived 2 doors down. I hadn't seen him in months. "Beatrice," he called out. "Got a minute?" I nodded, walking toward him cautiously. He took off his cap, rubbing the brim like it was a nervous habit. "I saw her," he said. "Your sister that day at the mall." I didn't speak. I saw her walk away, lock the car. I figured maybe she forgot something inside, or maybe she was coming back. But when I realized she didn't, he paused, swallowing hard. "Your mom called me the next day, asked me not to say anything, said it'd tear the family apart." I clenched my jaw. "So you stayed silent?" He nodded. "I did, and I regret it, but not anymore." He handed me a folded paper, a statement, dated, signed. I looked him in the eye. "Thank you." Back at school, I made copies, his statement, the text message, everything. Then I brought them to Dr. Isa, placing each sheet on her desk with deliberate care. "They won a war of words," I said. "I'll win it with receipts." That night I braced myself for the next move. And it came. Callista posted another video. This one darker. She sat in a dim room. Her voice hushed. "I'm scared for my family," she whispered. "She's twisting everything. And now people are attacking us. I don't know what's happening to her. Please just pray for us." The comments exploded. "She needs help. Poor girl. Media's brutal. Families shouldn't fight in public. It's shameful." I shut my phone off. There's a difference between silence and surrender. And I was done being quiet. The sidewalk outside the courthouse was swarmed with camera flashes and questions shouted too fast to answer. I kept my head up, my spine straight. I didn't slow down until I heard someone call out, "Do you regret it?" I stopped, turned halfway, and answered without hesitation, "No, but I regret not speaking up sooner." And that was it. I didn't linger for applause or further questions. I walked straight to the car waiting at the curb, Dr. Isa's, and slipped into the passenger seat. She didn't say anything. She just started the engine and turned down the radio. We drove in silence for a few blocks. Then she said, "You were clear. Brave, too." I didn't feel brave, I admitted, watching the city roll past the window. "I just felt done," she nodded, then added, "That's when the strongest decisions are made." I didn't return to school that day. Instead, I spent the afternoon at the district office filing paperwork, officially petitioning for emancipation. I'd met the minimum legal requirements. With ISA support, the statement from Eldon, Fraser, and the evidence, it wasn't a hard case to make. It still felt surreal. Handing that paperwork to a clerk who didn't know me, whose name I'd forget by tomorrow, but whose signature on the form would change everything. By the time I got home, it was nearly dusk. The house looked the same. Suburban, calm, windows glowing, lawn trimmed, but it felt different, like something had shifted underneath the surface. Something small but irreversible. Inside, Verena was sitting at the kitchen island, scrolling her tablet. She looked up and forced a smile that never reached her eyes. "I saw the clip," she said. I didn't answer. "You didn't have to say all that. Not like that." I dropped my backpack near the stairs. Would any other way have worked? She sighed, pushing her glasses higher up. Her nose. "We could have handled this in-house. You didn't need to make us a spectacle." I turned slowly to face her. "That's your apology. Not for what happened, but because I didn't protect your image." She stood then, lips tight. "Beatrice. Families fight. Sisters get jealous. Emotions get messy. But we're supposed to rise above it, not drag it out for strangers. It wasn't a fight," I snapped. "It was abuse. And you knew. You always knew." The silence that followed was louder than anything we'd said. Across the room, Callista emerged from the hallway, hair tied back, face scrubbed bare for once. "She didn't raise you to ruin us," she said quietly. "But I guess we underestimated how vindictive you could be." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. "Vindictive?" I asked. "You locked me in a car. You called me a brat and said I deserved to melt. And now you want sympathy because I dared to tell the truth." Her jaw tightened. "I was angry. You tried to get me in trouble. With Mom, with Andy, with everyone." "Andy dumped you," I said flatly. "Because he saw through you, just like everyone else is starting to." Her eyes narrowed. "I swear if you think this is over." But I was already walking away. That night, the world did the one thing I never expected. It turned. It started with a leak. An anonymous account posted a screen-recorded video footage from Callista's cloud storage. Somehow, someone had gotten access to a saved clip she never intended to share. In the video, she sat on her bed laughing with her friend over FaceTime. "She tried to get me in trouble for Andy," she said. "Let her cook. Maybe that'll teach her." Just those few seconds, enough to destroy the narrative she'd worked so hard to build. The video spread like wildfire. Students shared it. Local news stations picked it up. Even people who had once defended her now sent me private messages apologizing, asking if I was okay. And for the first time, I didn't feel alone. Verena tried to salvage what was left. She released a statement, typed in the Notes app, screenshotted, and shared on her Facebook. "As a mother, my heart is broken. I try to protect both my daughters, but mistakes were made. I ask for privacy as we try to heal." It read like it came from a PR firm, not a parent. The kind of apology that wasn't for me, but for her reputation. Later that night, she knocked on my door. "I meant what I said," she told me. "I know," I replied. "That's what makes it worse." Callista, for her part, went silent, deleted her social media, stopped answering texts. She vanished in the most public way possible. Gareth didn't say anything, but one morning his closet was half empty. His boots were gone. The photo of our family from the hallway wall taken down. No one mentioned it. Dr. ISA connected me with a social worker named Patricia. Warm, calm, patient. She explained the emancipation process clearly without judgment. "You've done most of the hard work already," she said. "Now, we just finished the paperwork." It was happening fast. I didn't tell anyone. At home, I didn't need to. They'd feel it. Soon enough. The morning of the court hearing, I woke up early, packed a small bag, and walked past the kitchen without saying goodbye. Vera looked up from her coffee. Callista didn't even raise her head. It felt like a funeral for a version of me they had built, then blamed. Outside the courthouse, the reporters were already gathered. I didn't flinch this time. I walked straight through them, Patricia at my side, and when someone yelled, "Do you regret it?" I gave them the only answer that ever mattered. No, but I regret not speaking up sooner, and that was the truth. Not polished, not pretty, just mine. The words I just spoken still echoed in my ears as I stepped off the courthouse steps. No, but I regret not speaking up sooner. They didn't feel like victory. They felt like oxygen, like the first clean breath after being underwater far too long. Dr. Isa was waiting by the curb, her posture steady and composed. I climbed into the backseat of her car without speaking, and she pulled away in silence. Only once we turned a few corners did she glance at me in the rearview mirror. "You okay?" she asked. "I don't know," I replied honestly. She didn't press further. We drove directly to the courtroom where the trial was being held. No delays, no time for reflection. The entire morning had been structured tightly. Security waited at the doors, and though the courtroom was half empty, it felt fuller than I could handle. Callista sat across from me, not quite meeting my gaze. Her lawyer shuffled papers, whispered things in her ear that she didn't appear to hear. Verena sat behind her, lips pressed so tightly together they'd nearly disappeared. Gareth didn't show. It didn't surprise me. The trial itself was quiet. No theatrics, just evidence and statements. I went first. My voice didn't shake. Even though my palms were damp, I told the story from beginning to end, just like I had for the reports. I didn't add drama. I didn't need to. Next came Dr. Isa. Then Eldon Fraser. His words were calm, but direct, confirming what everyone already suspected, but had needed someone else, someone objective to say out loud. Then came the exhibits. The footage, the screenshot, the video clip. Callista never meant to be seen. She tried to get me in trouble for Andy. Let her cook. Maybe that'll teach her. The court fell quiet after that. When the judge read the verdict, Callista didn't move, didn't blink, just stared ahead. Like the words weren't about her. Her lawyer placed a hand on her shoulder. When it was over, but she didn't react. Guilty. Endangerment. Intent to harm a minor. 7 years. It wasn't a harsh sentence, but it was a sentence. And for Callista, it wasn't the courtroom that truly punished her. It was the coverage. The next morning, the headline ran in bold across every local news site. Perfect daughter sentenced. Family abuse comes to light in Temecula court. Her former classmates reposted it with captions ranging from sarcastic disbelief to outright rage. A few girls she used to call charity cases now cheered her downfall. Verena tried to save face as always. She issued a statement on social media poorly disguised as heartfelt. My family is going through an unimaginable time. I ask that everyone show compassion as we heal. Please do not direct hate at my daughter. We all make mistakes in life. Compassion. She wanted compassion. But when I begged for a voice, she called me dramatic. And Gareth, he didn't issue a statement at all. He didn't even come home. When I walked in a day later to pick up the last of my things, his boots were gone. The hooks by the door empty. His closet half cleared. I climbed the stairs slowly, room by room, collecting what little belonged to me. Most of it was just clothes and a few old books. I didn't pack photos. I didn't want the wait. As I stepped into the hallway, something strange happened. The large family photo that hung above the stairs, Callista in her graduation cap, Verena, and Gareth beaming me off to the side, fell. It didn't slide. It dropped. Glass. Shattered across the tile below. Verena heard it. She rushed out from the kitchen, startled. What happened? I stared at the frame. I didn't answer. I didn't pick it up. I didn't even flinch. Beatrice, she said. Still I said nothing. I just stepped over the shards and walked past her. She didn't follow me. Outside, the air was crisp, the kind that makes your lungs sting a little in the best way. A car pulled up. It was Patricia, my social worker. She smiled softly and opened the passenger door. You ready? She asked. I nodded. We drove straight to the press conference, arranged by the local advocacy center. I hadn't wanted to speak at first, but when they offered the platform after everything, I knew I needed to. I stood at the podium, flashbulbs popping, the hum of microphones surrounding me. My name is Beatrix Crawford, I began. And for years I was silent, not because I didn't know how to speak, but because every time I tried, I was taught not to. I paused. But truth doesn't wait for permission. It builds, and one day it becomes too loud to ignore. I looked out at the crowd. Some nodded, some teared up, some just listened. Truth can't be dressed up. It's ugly, but it's free. And it's mine. I stepped away from the mic, not waiting for questions. Later, that afternoon, I boarded the bus out of town. One way, no return. I had a scholarship waiting at a small community college 2 towns over. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I chose a window seat near the back. At the next stop, a woman in her 60s sat beside me. Neat blazer, warm eyes. She studied me for a moment, then asked gently, You're the girl from the story, aren't you? I looked at the woman beside me on the bus. She had kind eyes, the kind that weren't prying, just curious. Her question hung in the air between us. You're the girl from the story, aren't you? I smiled softly, pulled my backpack onto my lap, and said, Not anymore. We didn't speak again for the rest of the ride. She stared out the window. I watched the back of the seat in front of me. Somehow, silence felt like the right answer to everything lately. When we pulled into the next station, I thanked her politely and got off. The sky was bruised with the first strokes of sunset, and the air carried the scent of something baking from a nearby bakery. It was my first full week in the new town. The transitional housing unit was tucked behind a community center. Not glamorous, but safe. Each person got a room the size of a college dorm, a shared kitchen, and access to case workers. Mine, Tanya, had been kind. Not too chipper, not cold, just steady. The kind of steady I hadn't had in years. I dropped my bag onto the twin bed and went straight to the desk. There was one form I hadn't signed yet, not because I didn't want to, but because I needed to make sure the legal name change. It was printed clearly at the top. Petition to change name for legal adult use. In the blank, I had written Beatrice E.A. I stared at it, the pen hovering. Then, with one fluid motion, I signed Beatrice ISA. Not Crawford, not a name tied to screams behind locked doors and forced silence. ISA like DR. ISA, the first adult who looked me in the eye and believed me without making me prove it first. The next day, I started my volunteer training at the youth shelter. It wasn't glamorous either. Mostly filing intake notes, shadowing counseling sessions, helping organize food pantries. But it felt real, more real than anything I'd done before. One afternoon, a girl named May sat across from me, arms crossed, jaw clenched. She'd just run away from a foster home. I offered her a juice box, which she didn't take. They say I'm the problem, she said. Everywhere I go, I Didn't offer a platitude. I didn't tell her it would get better. I just said, "That's what they told me, too." Her eyes flicked up. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. 2 weeks later, I enrolled in a certificate course for trauma-informed care. Classes were in the evenings, so I started working part-time at a local bookstore in the mornings, alphabetizing titles, listening to people argue about fiction versus nonfiction. It was simple, quiet mine. I spent nights journaling, and one night, without fully intending to, I wrote something longer, something more cohesive, a story really about a girl behind glass, watching, waiting, surviving. I called it The Girl Behind the Glass. I submitted it anonymously to a blog that published first-person essays from trauma survivors. It went viral within 4 days. Teachers reached out, parents, social workers, people I didn't know messaged the site to say they'd read it to their kids. Others asked to share it in classrooms. I watched the view count grow and grow until the numbers blurred together. And then someone figured it out. They didn't post my name publicly, but they messaged me. "I know this is you. Thank you. I needed this more than I can explain." And for once, I didn't panic at being seen. A few months later, a letter arrived at the shelter. No return address. The handwriting was sharp, familiar. It was from Callista. Only 3 lines. "You took everything. But maybe I never had it to begin with." Mom made sure of that. There was no apology, just pain. But it was honest. And somehow that mattered more. It didn't excuse anything, but it made the picture more complete. For the first time, I didn't see her as the monster in my story. She was a storm I had to survive. Yes, but someone had handed her the thunder first. Someone who praised her when she lied and ignored her when she needed help. I didn't write back. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to. That weekend, I walked to the ocean. The beach wasn't busy. Just a few families, a couple with a kite. I stepped out of my shoes and let my feet sink into the sand. The breeze stung faintly against my arms, still scarred from the heat that day. The skin was tougher now, sensitive to temperature shifts, but stronger than it had ever been. I closed my eyes, letting the wind push through my hair. The past can't be unwritten, but I can write what comes next. That night, back in my room, I opened my journal and wrote the final entry. Truth nearly killed me, but it's also the only thing that ever set me free. Then I closed the cover. No flourish, no drama, just the quiet certainty that this chapter, this life was finally mine to tell. Sometimes the people meant to protect us are the ones who teach us how to survive without them. Beatrix's story isn't just about revenge. It's about reclaiming a voice that was buried under years of silence. It's about how truth, no matter how painful, can be the first step toward healing. And maybe that's a question worth asking. How many of us are still waiting for someone to